You know, it's funny, I honestly don't remember when this album came out. Back in 1990, I was 19 years old. I was obsessed with heavy metal. I used to buy CDs all the time. I would go to Tower Records, and then I would watch Headbangers Ball every Saturday night, and I would read all these different metal magazines. I would just buy them every week. I thought I pretty much knew what was going on in the heavy metal world, but here's the strange thing. I don't remember ever hearing about Black Sabbath's album, Tyr. For the longest time, I didn't even know it existed. It wasn't until many years later, when streaming and YouTube made it easy to explore back catalogs, that I discovered it. And when I did, I thought, wait a minute, how did I miss this one? How could an entire Black Sabbath album have slipped under my radar in 1990? That's the question that really got me thinking and why I wanted to make this video. Why is the Tyr album the most overlooked Black Sabbath album? To understand Tyr, you have to look where Black Sabbath was at the time. The album that came before it was Headless Cross, that came out in 1989. That album was all about dark, almost gothic themes, hell, demons, occult, things like that. It fit perfectly with the late 80s metal scene, where darker imagery was really popular. But with Tyr, the band decided to shift gears. Instead of singing about hellfire and damnation, they started leaning into mythology, specifically Norse mythology. The title of the album itself, Tyr, comes from the Norse god of war and justice. So right away, you could tell they were going for something different. This was kind of unusual for Black Sabbath. Sure, they had always dealt with dark and mystical themes, but Tyr went into this more epic, almost fantasy direction. You've got songs that talk about Jerusalem, the Norse gods, Odin's court, and these big mythological stories. It gave the album a very different feel compared to what they had done before on the Headless Cross. Now let's talk about who was in the band at the time. Black Sabbath has always been known for its rotating lineups, and in the late 80s and 90s was no exception. We had Tony Iommi, of course, the one constant in Sabbath. His guitar riffs are the backbone of everything. Then it was Tony Martin on vocals. Tony Martin was in the band since The Eternal Idol in 1987, and while he doesn't get nearly enough credit, his voice was strong, melodic, and powerful. On bass, you had Neil Murray, who had worked with Whitesnake and other bands. Cozy Powell was on the drums. He is an absolute legend who had played with Rainbow, Whitesnake, and so many others. And there was also on keyboards Geoff Nicholls, who was kind of a behind-the-scenes guy. He was in Sabbath since the early 80s. The lineup had a ton of talent. In fact, musically, they were rock solid. But for some reason, they never got the recognition that Ozzy and Dio lineups did. And I think that's part of why Tyr slipped through the cracks. Let's dive into the songs, because that's why this album is really good. The opener, Anno Mundi, the vision, sets the tone right away. The title means in the year of the world. The song feels big and epic. It talks about the state of the world, almost a warning about humanity's future. The riffs are heavy, vocals are soaring, and it's a great way to kick things off. Then there's The Lawmaker, which is fast and powerful. This is one of the more straightforward heavy metal songs in the album. It really shows off Cozy Powell's drumming. But one of the highlights for me is Jerusalem. Lyrically, it deals with the holy city and the weight of its history. It's got that haunting quality to it, and Tony Martin really delivers an emotional performance. Another big track is the Sabbath Stones. Now, if you want a song that feels like classic Black Sabbath, this is the one. It's dark, it's heavy, it's got that doomy vibe that takes you back to the early 70s. And lyrically, it talks about judgment and punishment, almost like biblical wrath, which ties into the mythological theme of justice. Then we've got Odin's Court, which is more of an atmospheric instrumental piece. It serves as the lead-in song to Valhalla. Together, these two tracks really lean into the Norse mythology theme. You can practically imagine the gods and warriors of legend when you hear it. And then there's Feels Good to Me. Now, this is one I think it's underrated. Some fans didn't like it because it's more of a ballad. It definitely stands out compared to the rest of the album. But I think it's a really strong song. It's emotional, it's well written, and Tony Martin's vocals shine. Honestly, I feel like this song could have been a hit if it had gotten the right push. And here's something interesting. When I did my research, this was the only song that had a music video. I checked it on YouTube. I don't remember watching it on the Headbangers Ball, but I remember watching Headless Cross a year prior to that, and that was on all the time. I think they played it at least every Saturday night, at least when I started watching the Ball. So I guess this wasn't pushed as much, and to be honest, they probably should have made a video for a heavier song like the Sabbath Stones. That might have pushed the album a little more. That was probably a better track, but I don't know, there were probably some more reasons for that. But the album closes with Heaven in Black, another heavy, fast-paced track. It leaves you with this powerful, driving energy, and that's pretty much the album. So let's get to the big question. Why is Tyr so overlooked? Why did it fly under the radar for me back in 1990 and for so many others? One reason is that Black Sabbath just wasn't in the spotlight at that time. The late 80s and early 90s were dominated by thrash metal, glam metal, and later on the grunge scene. So we had bands like Metallica, Guns N' Roses, and eventually Nirvana getting all the attention. Black Sabbath, especially the Tony Martin lineup, didn't really have the same visibility. Another reason the album wasn't promoted very well. It didn't get much radio play, at least not where I lived. I don't remember seeing the videos on MTV or hearing much about it in magazines. So even though I was really into metal at the time, it just wasn't being pushed the way the other albums were. There's also the fact that fans tend to focus on the Ozzy and Dio eras of Sabbath. Those lineups are legendary, and for good reason. Because of that, the Tony Martin era often gets overlooked, even though it produced some really strong albums. Looking back, I think Headless Cross and The Eternal Idol are slightly better albums overall. They're a little tighter, a little more consistent, but Tyr still holds its right. It's got great songs, strong performances, and a unique theme that sets it apart. If you compare it to other Tony Martin albums, it's definitely one of the better ones. So why is Tyr the most overlooked Sabbath album? It came out at a time when the spotlight was elsewhere, didn't get the promotion it deserves, and because the Tony Martin era in general is underrated. But when you go back and listen to it now, you realize how good it actually is. For me, discovering this album years later was like finding a hidden treasure in Sabbath's catalog. It made me realize that even when they weren't in the spotlight, Black Sabbath was still putting out quality music. Let me know in the comments if you're an older guy like me. Did you remember this album when it came out? Did you buy it when it came out? And did you know about it when it came out? So I'm just interested in knowing that. Maybe it was more popular in the UK or something like that. So I'm interested in that question. Let me know. And if you haven't given Tyr a listen in a while, or you haven't heard at all, I recommend checking it out. I think go in with an open mind. It's a little different, but it's still Sabbath. But I think you might be surprised how strong it is. And that's all. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, share your thoughts about Tyr in the comments. I'd love to know what you think of this album. And before, I was talking a lot about Headless Cross, and actually did a video on that. I think it was last year. I'm going to stick that on the screen here right next to me. So if you want to watch that one next, you can check that out. I talk about like the dark nature of that album, so that's pretty cool. But until next time, I will see you in the next one.